So there is the other angle of it from an investment standpoint. It's also a great thing to do because a lot of people don't want to rent out their basement because they don't want to be sharing the floor and the ceiling with somebody else. It could be noisy. Sound could go through the ductwork. It's kind of like they're living in the same space as you. So people that don't want that, they can now build a garden suite at the back. You have nothing to do with that tenant, and then you can rent it. You can rent it to long term, and you can even rent it as Airbnb, and that's fine with today's regulation as well. It makes a ton of money.
Well, yeah, and there's a difference between a laneway and a garden suite. I think the garden suite is you can not sell your property and you use all the utilities I think you share. But I think a laneway home has its own metering system, and then if you wanted to split it, you're able to do that and actually sell the property. I believe that's the difference between the two of them.
So it depends who you ask. They're effectively from a code standpoint, it's the same thing. Garden suite, ADU, laneway housing, it's all the same thing. But some lenders differentiate between laneway housing and garden suites. Mm-hmm. And those specific lenders consider garden suites to have access to the driveway, where you can come in immediately from the driveway and you can access it. And laneway housing, you'll come in through the driveway and then make your way to the back of the property where you don't have direct immediate access. So that's the lender's definition between the garden suite and the laneway housing.
Yeah. So obviously you've been learning how to pivot because this actually just started really happening the last few years, I guess, since COVID. Before COVID, I guess we weren't really allowed to do a lot of the stuff, if I remember correctly. I have a property in Roncy, and we have a coach house. We couldn't do that. We weren't allowed to. We weren't allowed to modify that. But since COVID, and now things have changed. Have you noticed you obviously pivoted pretty quickly? And when did you start rolling out these tiny homes? Like, was it immediate, or was it you just had an aha moment like, hey, we can really capitalize on this?
I think, we were in the right place at the right time. We're already in the business. We're doing this type of work. We're doing things that are very similar. We made a few recent partnerships that were already in that space. So we're like, okay, that makes no sense not to go after. So we started about a year and a half ago, and then we've been doing quite a few since then.
So what did you do before? So you said you started the company in 2016?
Yes.
What's your background?
So I studied engineering. I'm a civil engineer by background, and then I went into the construction space right out of school.
Nice.
From there, I used to work in northern BC in these remote location, fly in, fly out. So I got a little bit sick of that life, did it for a year and a half. Then I said, you know what? I want a life. I want to see people. So I moved back here.
You want to see people?
Yeah.
Are you sure now?
Well, with the way I'm going with the garden suites, then it looks like it's going to be more people than ever.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Moved back here. And then what happened was, got a sort of a consulting job where I was doing engineering work as a consultant. Obviously, the pay was half and the expenses was tenfold.
Shit.
So I was like, okay, this doesn't add up. Something is off. So I said, okay, I got to venture out for myself. So I started, what I did is I bought my first property, a rental. And then did a little bit of work to it. Then I bought a second one. It needed a little bit more work. And then I was kind of into it. That's when I first started getting exposed to the renovation and the construction side. And it took off from there.
Well, I tell that to people, to realtors too. One of the questions I had, they had these young realtors. We had a party at my place with some like the close realtors we had. We had about 60 realtors in my house. And I was talking to these younger agents that are like, so if you had any advice for us, I'm like, what would it be? And the reason why I'm bringing this up, let's say, so young realtors, I'm like, do you own your own property? I'm like, no, do you own a rental property? I'm like, you can stay at home, like buy a rental property. Yeah. I don't care if it's a condo, I don't care if it's a house. And then that way you learn how to be a landlord. You'll know what it's taking to carry your property. And it also gets some income. So you can still live with mom and dad, like they're in their 20s, like early 20s. I'm like, you still live with mom and dad, but still experience. That's how I started. Yeah. You still experience how it's like to be an owner. It's hard to, and that's why I say that's the same thing for you. Like you were in the construction before, you're just in, have this idea and then you're just pointing at people, you do this, you do that. Like, although in the video you did do that. You just came with coffee. Hey, what's going on? Yeah. But I always find that it's better to actually be entrenched in it before you become the boss and know and that's perfect. I think that's amazing. That background really, really helps you. Don't you find that?
Yeah, it definitely does. If you don't know what work needs to get done, you can't really tell people to do it. So you got to know to a certain extent. If you don't get 80% of it, then it's, you got some work to do.
Things change all the time. You have to learn how to pivot, right? Yeah. Of course. So, I get that. So at what point in your mind, you're like, I got to start this business, and you just went on a whim and just said, hey, like we're family. And I always ask this entrepreneurs, because whenever we start a business, the people that always have the 9-to-5s think you're crazy. They're like, are you nuts? Like, you already have a good paying job. What are you doing?
Yeah.
So what was the aha moment, and was there any pushback from family or friends?
There's always pushback because, different or things that are different in society tend to be looked at in a negative way. So if someone is the odd person out, people kind of look and they're like, what are they doing? So anytime you're doing something that's different from whatever the rest of the people are, you're going to get a bit of criticism.
Of course.
I'm sure you see it plenty.
Oh, yeah. Well, people, I always worry about this podcast because this is one of our more tame ones because we're talking about the things in the industry, but we'd run other ones where we talk about conspiracy stuff too. And when we do, we push the envelope, and Owen's looking at me on the side there too. And it's like some of the feedback we get, it's like, man, it's because again, you're pushing the envelope. It's not something everybody talks about. And some people don't like that, right? They'll push back, just stick to real estate. I'm like, well, thanks, man. That's not all my personality, right?
That's true.
Yeah. So I like that. So a little bit back to the business. Okay. So I saw that one video we're looking at. You looking at a garage, you walked in, you're like, and it's kind of a little dilapidated and figure out. So you're looking at a garage. It's like, I was trying to say, do you use do you look at it and say, look at the foundation? Do you figure out are you able to put second stories on there? How does the whole process work? And obviously, is it like a home or, there's some parts of Toronto, which you're not even allowed to touch the foundation, if I'm correct, right? You have to keep the structure of the look of the home. It's almost, and then you're able to build on it, but you can't go deep. Is that correct?
So, yes, it's, here's how it works. Number one, it always works backwards from the client budget because the budget is what dictates how much work you can do. If somebody has an existing garage in the back and they say, I have, $120,000, then there's no options. You're working as much as possible with that shell and you're going to dress it up cosmetically on the inside and then add what you got to add, run the utilities and all that stuff. There's no room in the budget. If someone says, I want to invest $250,000, $350,000, then what you're going to do is you're going to be adding onto the garage. And then you got to be strategic with where you're adding. You either will add on the back, you'll add above, or you may add both. But you're going to be getting more rent for it. So it's a different type of investment. So I would say it always starts from whatever the budget is. And then we can decide on a technical standpoint what you can do in the garage. So if you have a garage, like I said, where the existing shell is decent, that's usually the best bang for your buck. Doesn't mean it's bringing the most rent per month, but in terms of the dollars you're putting in, you don't have to redo a lot of the shell. So that's a really good place to start. But again, someone wants to make a bigger investment. They just pulled out a refinance. They got to put that money to work. You can do a lot more. And we'll find that the existing structures back in the day, a lot of things weren't built with any permits. So they may have put a house right up on the lot line. Today, you need a setback depending on which side of the lot, but at least 4 feet, right? So if you decide to take that wall down, you can't put it up in that same spot again. So if you have a tight lot and now you got to shift that wall 4 feet in and do all this extra foundation work, you may not be getting a return on your investment.
Right.
So those are the cases where we go in case by case and see what exactly is the best fit, starting from your budget and making your dollar go further.
So I'm thinking from my and sorry for being because I always want to do this. So I'm personal side, but maybe a little selfish because for a couple of reasons. We have, again, the property I have in Ronzi, it's a 6-plex.
Okay.
So in the back, we have a shared coach house. Coach house back in the day was for the horses. That's all the home is, right? And it's an existing structure. If we knock it down, we're told we're not allowed to build it up. But when the garden suites came out, we were thinking, okay, maybe we'll convert this. Now, twofold question for you. One was that I share a wall with my neighbor. So would we be allowed to build on my half of that coach house and doing something with the shared wall? Or do I have to have his buy-in, or are we allowed to without that?
We'd have to check that specific address because you mentioned it's already a 6-plex, right?
Yeah.
So the reason garden suites are so easy is because so don't quote me word for word, but it's up to 5 units. And I believe in Toronto, you're allowed 5 units. Yeah. So anything over 4 or definitely over 5 is subject to a minor variance.
Yeah, this is my second question.
Yeah.
Because with most banks, believe it or not, it's like if you want to keep your property as a residential property, it has to be under 3 to 4 units, 3 to 4 doors, right? I'm with RBC. RBC allowed us to do 6 units. That's why we're able to have that. But if I add the garden suite and it became the property, so this is my second question. I was like, if we add the garden suite, am I allowed to sever that and have it as its own entity?
As of right now, no. But when it does, that's a game changer because it's effectively a house.
Well, yeah, it'd be huge.